Alright, just got back from about a 2-hour ride. My first ride on the DZR 400S. So I'm just going to do my first impressions of the bike as a new bike. I haven't ridden a bike in 6 years, but I hopped right on that thing, man, and in a matter of 15-20 minutes I was pretty comfortable with it. First thing I noticed was I was on the road for about 20 minutes before my butt was absolutely killing me. That seat is not comfortable at all. It might be good for off-roading because it's firmer, but definitely not good for road trips. Took it on the highway for a while. It did fine. It was getting blown around a little bit. You know, once you hit 70, 75 miles per hour, it's really windy. Definitely not a bike for cruising the highway. I mean, it had no issues with power or speed on the highway. It was just not a fun ride because you're getting blown around everywhere, and you know, there's no windshield. But that's not why I bought this bike. I was just trying to get from point A to point B, so it did fine to get me there. After being on the highway for a while, I got on some backcountry roads, and that's really where the bike is fun. I felt real comfortable in the corners. You know, I had 6 years ago I had a Suzuki GZ 250, I think it was. That bike sat a lot lower to the ground. Could not go on the highway at all, just because you know, you'd be screaming at 55, 60 miles per hour with that thing, whereas this thing's doing 70 with no problems. But the handling between the two, even though this one's sitting a lot higher, I didn't really notice a huge difference in the handling. And actually, I think that comparing the two, this one was more fun to ride through the curves than the 250 that I used to have. I like the fact that the pegs are up higher off the ground, because on my 250, when I really got into the curves, I would always hit the pegs on the ground. With this one, it's really not an issue about hitting the pegs. On a lot of the blogs, I heard people saying that they wish there was a 6th gear on this thing. I mean, mine's a 2013, but I think they're all pretty much the same. I don't see a need for a 6th gear, because when you're going, I mean, the bike's not really that great that fast because it's just too much wind. It's a lot more fun in the slower speeds, like 45 to 70. So I don't see a reason why you'd want a 6th gear. I was going 70, 75 on the highway, and there was still power left. So, and I wasn't screaming down the highway either at that speed. So I felt like no need really for a 6th gear, though maybe as I ride it more, maybe I'll feel differently. Another thing I noticed is the turn signal lights and the high beam indicator right here on the left hand side. You can see the neutral indicator right there. At night they're like super bright. Like I didn't even want to have my high beams on because the blue light for the high beam indicator was like blinding me. So I'm sure it's good in the daytime so you can see, you know, the indicators, but I'm gonna have to get some kind of something to cover them up a little bit or dim them, because they're just blinding. The little display panel, I mean, it did the job, you know. I kind of wish it had a tack, but then again, I guess you don't really need a tack on a bike like this. But yeah, the display is really easy to read as far as your miles per hour. It's got a couple different trip settings. Like I said, I was running for like 2 hours. I ran out of gas at exactly, this is a brand new bike, I think it had 4 miles on it. I ran out of gas at 88 miles when I was on the highway. So I just reached down, and it was really intuitive to find where the reserve switch was. I just reached down, switched it over to the reserve tank, and I didn't even have to stop. I was back up and running again. So I'm guessing the way I was driving it, this thing I can get out of a full tank, I can get about 85 miles. And when I get more used to it, I'll probably drive it a little harder, so I'd say maybe 80 miles out of a tank. That was highway and some backcountry road type driving. Most of it was around 55 miles per hour and then 70 on the highway. I really like the bike. It's you know, you can't, you know, it is what it is. It's not a sports bike. You can't hit the turns at, you know, 60, 70 miles per hour on this thing. But that's not what I wanted. If I wanted that, I would have got a street bike. And it's not a cruiser, you know, it wasn't that fun on the highway. Definitely got me from A to B. But what I really wanted it for was, I've always wanted a dirt bike. But I never actually had the money to afford the truck and a trailer and all the other crap that goes along with having a dirt bike and getting it out there. And the reason I haven't had a bike in the last 6 years is just because I'll get bored of just riding around, I guess, for any kind of bike that I can afford anyways. And I didn't really want to get a cruiser or anything like that right now. So I figured I can get this bike, I can drive it out to trails and stuff, take it off-roading, which I didn't do tonight, which I wish I would have, but I still had fun just chilling, riding the back roads. But yeah, that's what I figured. I mean, now I don't need a truck and I don't need a trailer. You know, obviously if it's more than an hour away, you know, I'm gonna have to stop at a couple gas stations on the way out there. But I mean, where I live, you know, 2 hours away, there's some good trails, so you know, it's worth the ride for me to go out there. And there's some stuff around here too. You know, I just gotta start looking for it. You know, I just never had my eyes peeled for that kind of stuff until I started looking into this thing. So that's it for this ride. The first things I'm gonna do on this bike is something about that seat. I've got to make that seat more comfortable. I'm gonna get like a little utility rack thing for the back or something, so I can throw some bags on there or whatever, back and forth to work, or if I do go out to the trails, I want to bring some food, water, whatever out there. So I'm gonna get a little luggage rack in the back. And then, oh yeah, people were saying, oh, you got to replace the carb and the exhaust and all that kind of stuff, and you know, to get that little extra power out of it. I can see why they say that. You know, even though I haven't ridden a bike in 6 years and I'm a little rusty, I can still feel where there would be a desire for a little bit more horsepower out of this thing. I'm sure after I ride it a little bit more, I'm going to be one to replace the exhaust, maybe the carburetor. My only thing is, I don't really want a really loud exhaust, because I'm picturing myself finding like these nice little off-road areas that you may or may not supposed to be riding on, and may or may not supposed to be riding on, and I don't want to be screaming, you know, back there with this thing. I'd kind of like be able to just kind of go in quietly, do some off-roading, and then come back out. So if I can find an aftermarket exhaust that's not really loud, that'd probably be the first thing I'd do, and then the carburetor after that. And I mean, but really, I mean, stock, it was still fun. It still had enough power to have fun with. Like my old 250 didn't have any power, and that was fun, but this is way more fun just having the extra oomph. So that's my first impressions of the bike, and hopefully soon I'll get my helmet cam